Good Saturday morning, everyone. I'm Bobby Burton. This is On Texas Football. Welcome in. Going to talk a little Texas football this morning. I got some news and notes I want to share, as well as some thoughts about what happened yesterday with the commitment of Nick Brooks and what might happen later today. Jonah Williams, defensive back out of Galveston Ball, expected to make a decision tonight around 6:30 in the afternoon. Let's start with Nick Brooks, young man out of Grayson, Georgia, opted to choose the Texas Longhorns over Georgia as well as USC. He's another bonus-sized offensive lineman for Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian. Get this, he goes somewhere in the neighborhood of 6'6", 360 pounds. Big human, as Kyle Flood is wont to say, and Steve Sarkisian as well. But I started taking a look at what Kyle Flood has done over the last several years and trying to estimate or get a good grip on maybe where Texas is going with its offensive line recruiting. Came up with some pretty interesting figures. First of all, Brooks, I mentioned him and his size, but he gives Texas 5 commitments for the campaign. The other 4 are John Mills out of San Francisco, California. He goes about 6'6", 320. Jordan Coleman and Devin Coleman, the brothers out of Cedar Hill, 6'5", 350, 6'4", 340 for them. And then Jackson Christian, a lineman out of Port Neches Groves, he goes 6'5", 309. He's the small one of the bunch at this point. But what I want to say is this: that averages out to 6'5 and a quarter, 332 pounds. 6'5 and a quarter, 332 pounds. Now, let's think about this. Remember 3 years ago when the Pancake Factory came about and the University of Texas signed 7 offensive linemen, 3 of whom, or maybe even 4, will start for Texas at times this year. Here's the number on that group. 6'5 and a quarter, 332 was 2025. 2022, 6'4 and a half, 311 pounds on average. In other words, the 25 class already has 20 pounds on average against the 22 class and about a full inch on height as well. I think there's a trend here of Kyle Flood doubling down on what he's seen thus far and going as big as he can possibly get on the offensive line. Jerry Hamilton made this discussion point yesterday. We were talking about how Kyle Flood is recruiting. I see Flood right now. There are a couple of guys that are true left tackle prospects that you'll go after each and every year. But I think he goes after guys that he thinks can be right tackle, right guard, left guard, interior line prospects, as well as swing out the tackle. Whichever one proves to be the better athlete of the group then plays right tackle. That's what it looks like to me, is he's kind of situating himself where all of them are bonus size. They can all play across multiple positions across the offensive line. Now, if he catches lightning in a bottle and one of them's super athletic, maybe they play left tackle. But the interesting part to me is, like I said, 6'5 and a quarter, 332 pounds. That's not just big, that's super size. And we've made a lot of comments over the last couple of years about how Texas is trying to get bigger on the offensive line. I don't know that there's anybody that is getting bigger than Texas at this point. It's even big compared to other SEC schools, just to give you some thought process behind that. But anyways, Nick Brooks and his commitment, what does that do to the University of Texas recruiting class? Moves them up to number 12 overall in the 24/7 sports ranking. They're at 14 in the On3 ranking, remaining there. What might happen later today, though, is a different story. Jonah Williams, young man out of Galveston Ball, who I think is a phenomenal player, one of the top handful of players in the state of Texas this year, is expected to announce between Texas, Oregon, LSU, and Texas A&M. Believe he is staying close to home, so I really think it's going to be Texas, LSU, or A&M for his services. He goes about 6'3", 205. He's been an all-district MVP since his sophomore campaign. This isn't just your average everyday prospect. He's a top 10, 15, 20 prospect in the entire country, a top 5 prospect in the state of Texas. He would be a tremendous pickup for the Longhorns in this recruiting class. There's no doubt about that. You look at it, the only other guy right now that is rated as highly as Jonah Williams is in the recruiting class for the University of Texas is Khalil Lockett, the wide receiver out of Saxe in Garland. So you're talking about making him, if he were to commit to Texas, he'd be the 18th pledge and the highest ranked commitment, I believe, overall at this point in conjunction with Khalil Lockett. So you're talking about moving a team's recruiting rankings up precipitously with that number right there for Jonah Williams. A great thing about Jonah Williams, we've mentioned that he is a very good baseball player. A lot of people understand that, but that he is expected to forego his spring semester at Ball High in favor of enrolling at the school of his choice. That's big. That's big because that means he's not going to be entering in the baseball draft next April, and it will be actually playing probably college baseball for the team of his choice next spring, as well as probably trying to get in some work for the football team. But overall, those two guys right now are really important for this Texas class. That they are the higher rated guys. And I meant this to include Nick Brooks as well as Jonah Williams. Those two are really big for Texas. The third one that's going to be really big for Texas comes next Friday, a week from yesterday. Jamie French, the wide receiver out of Jacksonville Mandarin High School, announces for the Longhorns. He is another top 100 prospect in the country, one of the top 10 players or so in the state of Florida, elite wide receiver. The interesting thing here is this is a mirror somewhat to what happened last year around this time, where Texas started stacking elite level commitments late in the summer. If you remember that, not only was it Colin Simmons, but they also started adding guys later in the cycle as well that kept piling up commitments and keep what looked like a slow summer at first kind of turned on its head at the end of that summer and then into the football season as well. It feels like that same type of situation this year for the Longhorns. What I'm liking is that the quality of players now that Texas is in on very, very high. Of course, after Jamie French at Jacksonville Mandarin, Texas also in on two other players that I need to mention that will likely go into the season. That is Michael Terry out of San Antonio's Alamo Heights, as well as Madden Framo out of Southern California, a linebacker. Michael Terry last night had a tremendous run. I don't know if people got a chance to see that on Twitter or not, but a tremendous run from the tailback position. He looks like he's full on and ready to go. I want to mention some other things. Aiden Anding also expected to announce his decision today. As of right now, I do not think that's the Longhorns, but if things change, we will absolutely update you here on Texas football, as well as ontexasfootball.com. All right, now some news and notes from last night's football games. Dia Bell lost a nationally televised game. It was not his doing, though. Milton High School was just too much for American Heritage High School. Dia threw for 2 touchdowns, looked really good in the pocket, poised, has a nice feel for escapability. I really like the young man out of American Heritage. Was very, very impressed with what he had to offer, because I think he's not going to be a guy that he's going to be a guy that gives you some extra time in the pocket and for receivers to get further downfield. Not to be outdone, the 2026 commit may have had a great night or a very good night. Not to be outdone, KJ Lacey had a spectacular night, at least in the first quarter. He had 200 yards passing and 3 touchdowns in the first quarter alone in Saraland High School's first matchup of the season against Jackson. Lacey and Bell both having good nights last night. Also, some other notes. I mentioned that Michael Terry big run, Khalil Lockett. Of course, in Texas, They are not playing games for keeps, whereas Diabell and KJ Lacey and even Nick Brooks on Thursday night played a game that counted as a regular season game. Right now, Texas is still not playing games that count. They will start next week in the state of Texas high school groups. But there are some scrimmages. Caleb Chester, we mentioned this yesterday. He had a really nice interception against Sugar Land Elkins in a scrimmage. Michael Terry also long TD run, as I mentioned. All right, next up that I want to talk about, they have a simulated game today. The University of Texas football team. That's what Steve Sarkisian's got the guys doing. They're going to have a simulated game that includes busing to the stadium. That includes the clock operator. It includes helmet communication. It includes everything and then some. So the Longhorns having a simulated scrimmage, a simulated game day. I shouldn't say simulated scrimmage, a simulated game, full out today in DKR. They actually will start at 2:30, just like they will a week from today. So you'll see the Longhorns try to get after it in that regard. We might be able to get some notes. I don't know exactly how much hitting the Longhorns will do. I'm told it'll be mostly walkthrough. They might do some, though. And if so, we'll definitely have some information and news for you there as well. Other news and notes that I think are important. I still believe that the punting job at the University of Texas is up for grabs. There's no doubt that Michael Kern, the freshman, has the biggest leg of the bunch. Ian Ratliff has been more consistent, but hasn't been what some people would call hyper consistent. So he's not, killing it in that regard. At least that's what I'm being told at this point. Charlie Ferris is another guy that they're looking at as well. That job may not be decided until next week. Is just what I'm being told, because it is up and down between the two of those guys. We will see what Steve Sarkisian has to say. Sark will next go to the podium, by the way, and speak to the press next Monday. He is going to have press availabilities each and every week during the season. We will follow that here, of course, on Texas football. All right, other news and notes that we're waiting on and listening for at this point as it relates to the Longhorns. Defensive back rotation is big. Defensive tackle rotation is big. And what I mean by that is who are the first and second groups. We know right now Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton are primarily the first group, but who's the second group? A lot of people have heard Bill Norton's name, and he has been out there and been going at it, along with a group of other guys from Tia Savea to Jermaine Lole. Jure Bledsoe has had his name called, Alex January. That defensive line rotation is going to be very, very interesting to me. One thing about defensive end I would add to this is that Trey Moore seems more and more likely to potentially be a starter ahead of Ethan Burke, and moving Ethan Burke maybe over to the jack position that's currently occupied by Barron Sorrell. Sorrell would stay a starter at this point. We'll see just how much they work in Ethan Burke, not only at the buck position, but also the jack. So that is because Trey Moore, the young man out of UTSA, has looked really, really good in fall camp. He had a really good spring camp, but we didn't get to see him, obviously, because of what happened. I suffered a little tweaked injury, and Steve Sarkisian was having none of worrying about that. As far as the wide receiver rotation right now, we still do not know what Texas is going to go, what Texas is going to get here. Isaiah Bond has made big plays in scrimmages. Matthew Golden had a good scrimmage last week. Jonte Cook may end up being the guy that leads the team in catches in 2024. If you were to ask me and say who's going to do that, it might be him. I think Silas Bolden, though, is going to be one of those guys that Texas has to get into the game and get the ball. DeAndre Moore is another player that has been tough to deny a roster spot or a starting spot as he tries to emulate Jordan Whittington. all of that together kind of brings you an update of what we've talked about this week on Texas football. Recruiting, even though we're a week out from the game itself, has kind of taken center stage the last 24 to 48 hours and even into next Friday. Jamie French, the young man out of Jacksonville, Mandarin, he actually announces his decision at 7:30 Central on Friday morning. As far as Jonah Williams later tonight or this evening, he's announcing his decision at 6:30. Jerry Hamilton will be in attendance at that, and we will come to you live from that ceremony as well, hoping to see exactly what Jonah Williams decides on. All right, that's going to do it for this morning's Saturday conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a good Saturday. Hope you were able to come back here around 6:30 tonight and talk again with you. Also, we have our season prediction video coming up later today. I think Matt, our producer, is going to be working on that most of the morning. And all four of us, myself, Rod Babers, CJ Vogel, and Jerry Hamilton sat in and talked about that at length. We'll also be talking to a couple of coaches on Tuesday this week, Brian Irwin and Bob Shipley. I'm going to ask them their thoughts on it. We've got a lot of different people joining us here at On Texas Football. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy your weekend. It is the last one without a Longhorn football game in at least a month, which is great. Enjoy some college football, by the way, as well tonight and this afternoon as well. Georgia Tech, Florida State, and then tonight, Nevada, SMU. All right. For myself, Bobby Burton, and our producer, Matt Hutchison, thank you all for listening and watching on Texas Football. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Really do. Hook 'em.